Welcome, everybody. This is our weekly 2024 workshop class. And the usual suspects are here, Nat, Larissa, and Nico. Nat from near Denver, Larissa from Boston, and Nico from, I'm not sure where you are now. You're not in Cape Town, he's busy eating.
Yeah, I'm back in Cape Town, yes,
Okay,
South Africa.
so we're just starting in the section on emotions, which I think is a particularly interesting one. And I can start with the same material that we wound up with last time. That each of these emotions, the whole idea here is to make the emotions useful. Emotions, when you use them correctly, are incredibly powerful. Arguably the most powerful thing affecting humans. And there are 5 major emotion groups. Glad is very useful in enlivening people. We like to be around people that are glad. If you look at pictures of CEOs of companies, they invariably look happy, and people like to associate and be involved with happy people. And they also that group can create moods that people want to sustain. So it's a really important way to get what you want in a request. Set it up with a glad group emotion. People don't want to break the mood, so they'll give you what you asked for. Mad is very powerful and very dangerous. If you couple it with caring, it's very effective at energizing people in a positive way. Just plain anger energizes people in a negative way. Sad, interestingly enough, is very useful it's the only way to move through losses. And melancholy, interestingly enough, enhances creativity. This is a recent discovery of mine, recent meaning 3 or 4 years. And I think what happens is it kind of like a lot of things, it slows down the CPU thinking processor, lets kind of the more creative part of the brain run. Many people have the same kind of experience in showers or riding bicycles, the same reason. And then scared, again, it's a very powerful motivator to avoid catastrophe, particularly if it comes with the subtext of caring. Then love is essential for everything, so important that we treat it with a whole separate section about appreciation, which is really just a business word for love. So comments or thoughts? Okay.
Yeah, just experiencing it this morning, applying these emotions or to make it realize. As usual, I will refer to the B.A. Nelsons. It's really to see the effect, and how many of them, will then refer that you like a father to us. They experience the caring and so on. I mean, about the age differences and so on. This has got a huge impact when you show this like caring and so on. There's like disasters all over the place, always, in different ways, not just natural disasters, but then to show that presence and caring, huge effect.
Yep, thank you. Yep. So I've known from a long time ago, from my work in somatic psychology, that a good way to think about emotions is there are sensations in the body that show up in the body in specific locations, and we interpret these as emotions. And this whole field of somatic psychology is about the entire body and its connection to emotions. But I recently saw an article published in the US Academy of Sciences, and when I see something published there, I take it seriously. And some Scandinavian researchers took empty outlines, and they took hundreds of people from around the world, and they said, show on here with brighter colors where you feel these emotions come up. And glad, you see, illuminates the whole body, and particularly here in the face and chest area. Mad uniquely energizes the arms, and that's not surprising in that we're probably getting ready to defend ourselves or attack somebody. And I couldn't find sad, but I think they had depression, so I modified it a little bit. And in sad, we're basically have very little body energy. It's this quiet place. Scared, anxiety shows up in this lower chest region. That's quite common. And love energizes almost uniquely everywhere. So I think a major thing to think about is to think about your bodily energy. People who have I know that have extended recovery after deep surgery, their biggest issue is energy. And it's called Genki in Japanese. So if you practice living in glad and love, you'll get this energy that kind of powers this 80-year-old body forward every day. So kind of a little fun piece. What did each have in common? Music, sporting events, movies, and office drama. They all generate energizing emotions, and we like feeling energized. So music, this is Joshua Bell, one of the premier violinists in the world. Music is about expressing feelings, and I think that's really true. I've been a fan of Eric Clapton. He's kind of gone a little crazy lately. But the emotions he draws upon is the blues, which is a combination of melancholy and romantic. Sporting events, all the emotions? Yes, I think so. Movies, all the emotions, they're designed for this. And office drama, all the emotions. So drama is not a good thing, but this is another thing where we emotions. I came across this book many years ago by Dan Goleman, and he talked about EQ versus IQ, and then this paper later came in Harvard Business Review. Senior managers identified the organization's most outstanding leaders using objective criteria like profitability, which is the main thing a company gets down to in the final analysis. Emotional intelligence was twice as important as technical skills and IQ for jobs at all levels. And emotional intelligence was increasingly important at the highest levels. Why would that be? What happens if you move up in an organization? I can tell you my experience is that when I was a fairly junior scientist, it was all about my technical abilities. And I rose into management jobs, I think almost totally on the addition of my ability to work with people and motivate people and energize people. So as you go up in an organization, the job shifts over from being less and less about your technical abilities and more about your emotional abilities. Technical meaning it's driven by thoughts, and the people part by emotions. This makes sense to you?
Yes, Charlie, thank you.
What's more important for a happy marriage, EQ or IQ? What do you think? For any relationship.
EQ all the way.
EQ.
Yeah.
So speaking of marriage, she said, if I were to die and you were to be married, would you give your new wife my clothes? Oh, that's just silly. I never had any thought like that. I don't know where that came from. That's crazy. A little while later, she said, if I were to die and you were to be married, would you give your new wife my jewelry? Oh, that's such crazy talk. I never gave this any thought, whatever. So a little later, if I were to die and you were to be married, would you give your new wife my car? No, she can't drive a stick shift. Listen to the CEO of Microsoft. I think empathy is a business essential. By the way, this company is very successful under this guy's leadership. We're in the business of meeting unmet, unarticulated needs of customers. There's no way to get that right without a deep sympathy, without a deep sense of empathy. See what others are seeing. I got this video. I'm going to skip it just because I didn't tee it up correctly. Then Teresa Wiseman studies professions where empathy is relevant. Campbell has 4 qualities. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and communicating it. Empathy is feeling with people. So when we get to talking about storylines, I think there are 2 essential ingredients to getting powerful storylines to work for you. empathy, and assuming accountability. And again, there's a video here. Here we go.
Scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy: perspective taking, the ability to take a
perspective of another person, or recognize their perspective as their truth, staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do, recognizing emotion in other people, and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people.
Let's explore each of these in a little more depth. What would it be like to live in the habitual mindset of happiness? And the trick to doing this, as you know, is to manage your thoughts, your storylines. And it gives you this enormous energization, life energy. Spread glad. Habituate expressing glad in your personal bureaucracy, make it a habit. And use glad. Glad motivates others to grant you requests. What you're doing is you're creating a positive mood, and people, once they have that mood, they don't want to break the mood, so they'll give you what you want. So you probably get these, they're much less frequent now, but these phone calls from people selling marketing stuff. And the first thing they always say is, how you doing? Now, if you talk to somebody on trying to deal with a clerk to get a return on something or some problem with Amazon, they'll start with, how you doing today? And if I pick up the phone and hear, how you doing? I hang up. I know what it is. And when I get these people that say, how are you doing today? I said, let's stop the chit chat and get down to what we're trying to do. I know what they're doing. It's once you understand it, it feels manipulative. So you got to do this very carefully. And glad energizes everybody. That's why we like to be around glad people. So I think it's going to be interesting to watch this presidential campaign and who's bringing glad group and who's not to bear. So there are 2 very different glad group emotions. This fascinates me. The US corporations, probably the world corporations, conflated pleasure with happiness as all this toxic stuff. Cigarettes, fast food, now opiates. One opiate is too many and 1,000 isn't enough. So I made this table based on this data that I thought was pretty interesting. The neurotransmitter of pleasure is dopamine. The neurotransmitter of happiness is serotonin. The duration of dopamine is short and serotonin is long. Does it downregulate? What that means is, do you need more and more of it to have the same effect? With dopamine, yes. Serotonin, no, except dopamine makes it less effective. The action that supports it is taking for pleasure and giving for happiness. I was listening to a video about the difference between lust and love. And it said the emotional state feels similar, but the difference is in love, you're required to give and sacrifice, and lust, it doesn't. You don't do it. Do substances work? Yes. Drugs work. Alcohol works for dopamine. For serotonin, no. Is it addictive? Yes. All extremes of dopamine, whether it's gambling, alcohol, you name it, all addictive. And serotonin, no. So this is really interesting. He says the things that create happiness are not for sale. They are, however, available to every person on the planet. Basically, what you want to do is connect personally. That means eye-to-eye contact creates empathy, which has a physiological effect of energizing mirror neurons. No, that's too bad. I'm going to interrupt and go get this. I should have done this before. I didn't realize these things got disconnected, but let me take a minute and if I can do this.
In fact, all of the things that say, this feels good, I don't want or need anymore, are things that you can't buy. They're not for sale. They are, however, accessible to every single human being on the planet. They're all the things your mother told you, but you forgot. I call them the 4 C's. First one, connect. So interpersonal connection turns out to be extraordinarily important for happiness. And the reason is because face-to-face, eye-to-eye connection generates something called empathy. Empathy activates a specific set of neurons in your brain which have been termed mirror neurons, so that the feelings of the person you're talking to ultimately become adopted by you as well. And in that process, you generate contentment. So interpersonal connection is extraordinarily important.
Contribute, the second C. I invite people to contribute to their workplace using the materials in these workshops. Cope, sleep, mindfulness, this little exercise we do. The workshop has all these ingredients in it. The idea that you can take a break and rest during the breaks. The idea of 100% commitment, which is really a mindfulness state, then the exercise. And then cook real food. And turns out that tryptophan is the amino acid and omega-3 that builds serotonin, creates neural membranes for this. So our daily lunch has salad with the main ingredient being omega-3 oil. So we'll continue with him, let's see. Sorry, I should have done this. I just didn't realize that this was these are become disconnected. I haven't done these for a while.
It's okay. It's good to see how you're connecting these. So when we do it on our own.
Lastly, the 4th C, cook for yourself. When you go out to a fast food restaurant, you don't know what you're eating. And it turns out there are 3 items in your diet that matter in terms of the serotonin dopamine connection. The first one, tryptophan. Tryptophan is the amino acid that is the building block to make serotonin. Happens to be the rarest amino acid in our diet. It's mostly found in fish and flax. We don't eat a lot of fish in general. It's probably low on our list, in part because of shipping processes, farmed fish versus wild fish, etc. But the bottom line is fish have a very high level of tryptophan. Omega-3 fatty acids, those are found also in fish, and they are found in certain foodstuffs that are grown, mostly algae. Things that eat algae ultimately increase your omega-3s. So fish eat algae, we eat the fish. Why are omega-3s important? Because they provide stability to neuronal membranes, so it's less likely that neurons will die. And they can be compressed easier. They allow for neurons to come back to shape so that you don't kill off the neurons that ultimately drive happiness. And then lastly, the negative one, fructose, sugar, the one that actually drives dopamine up, also drives serotonin down. So high tryptophan, high omega-3 fatty acids, low fructose. That's called real food.
So Larissa, in your diet, I recommend flaxseed, and we buy this Baleen omega-3 oil from Amazon.
Nice.
And use it on, we have greens, mixed greens, we just chop up and use it for lunch every day.
Yeah, thank you, Charlie.
So MAD, this is really interesting. It's uniquely powerful and energizing. Mostly men use it more than women. And here's what's fascinating about this is that it's a cover-up emotion. And so typically people don't like to feel scared. And if you are afraid and you then generate anger, it's so strong, it'll stop the feeling of scared and can feel better. It's very useful to be angry at situations versus people. Here's Martin Luther King angry at injustice. I'm going to show 4 video clips later that I picked initially just because they were very dramatic. I just liked the drama in them, and I put them in the outcome committed piece because everything is about someone, the benefit of success that comes with being fully focused on the outcome. But later, looking at them, discovered they had another common ingredient I had not noticed at first. They all involve anger combined with love. And this is the combination that works very well. So what do you do when someone rages at you? I think the first reaction is to give it back. Problem with that is it just incites them into more rage. A better idea is to become a human lightning rod to drain their anger. So back when I was at NASA, the NASA administrator had a temperament a lot like Donald Trump, and he also had this thing of throwing out these crazy ideas. And he worked at TRW for many years. I had friends there, and I said, "What can I do to help Dan succeed and NASA succeed?" And they said, "The most difficult thing to do is to tell him that when he comes up with these ideas that would fly you into the wall, that they're not good ideas." So I ended up sitting next to him in the staff meetings. This is me and him and all the other top managers in NASA, about in headquarters, about a dozen people. The associate administrators, so-called, for the program offices, and maybe legal was there, chief counsel. And I would get ready for this, and I would start by belly breathing and ground my feet to the floor. So what I want to do is become a lightning rod, and Dan's going to say something most of the time that's just absolutely nuts. I sit there and get ready and say, "Dan, that's a really bad idea, and here's why," boom. And I'd wait, the lightning strike would come. I'm just imagining this as lightning strike. I'm continuing to breathe, very calm. And what would happen is after about 15 seconds, he'd say, "Charlie, you're absolutely right." This was enormously interesting because I became more famous for this than anything I'd ever done in NASA, because nobody else knew how to do this. And the first thing that helped was he and I had a long personal relationship, as personal as it got with someone like that. And the second thing was that I had this methodology that I could name this with a different metaphor, and it's not me personally, it's about him just discharging his energy and let it go through. So it's not easy to do, but it can be essential. And here's the big thing about habitually anger. It's deadly. Buddha said, "You will not be punished for your anger, you'll be punished by your anger." We're going to show, a lot of these things we look at two sides. The appreciation increases longevity and anger diminishes it. These are two different aspects of the same thing. We good comments, questions?
Can you say that last part again?
Yeah, so they're kind of like, you could use a terminology from Jung that anger is the shadow of appreciation. It's the inverse.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
Melancholy, sober reflection on life's choices. Van Gogh was kind of a mediocre painter, and his paintings are interesting, but the things that made him famous were the things that he painted when he was in this insane asylum after he cut off his ear in Arles, France. And Einstein was unable to get a university position. He was disowned by his family. They were very achievement-oriented Jewish people. And he was depressed, and he ended up getting a job in the patent office, which was not a job that a PhD physicist would want. And in that very depressed state, he wrote 2 papers that are his most famous in 1905. One was the photoelectric effect that won him a Nobel Prize. what that's about is there's what was the question of why you don't get any current flowing from a photoelectric plate until you get to a certain wavelength of light or a certain intensity of light. And this got to the idea of quantization, there being a certain threshold of energy before you can jostle electrons free, called the work function. That's what won him the Nobel Prize. And the other one was by doing imaginary experiments, imagining traveling on trains at the speed of light and knowing from the recent experiments with the that's completed by Michelson and Morley, the speed of light was a constant in vacuum. And that out of that came special relativity, which is the thing he's most famous for. And the fact that everything doesn't add linearly like it does in common experience, rather with this modifier called gamma, where this is the speed of the two objects relative to each other, and that's the speed of light. And so this became known as relativity. This all happened in his period of depression, and I don't think he ever did anything as creative in the rest of his life as he became celebrated and became a respected university professor, went to Princeton, the whole bit. So this can be very helpful. And I think that the only way to move through losses is to mourn them. So that's if you lose a contract or lose a colleague or a relative, that's what funerals are about, a chance to mourn it and move through it. So I had a very interesting experience with this, with Hubble. And let's stop and do our mid-class exercise, and I'll continue this story. So in the aftermath of discovering the Hubble mirror flaw, my program scientist came to me and said, the astronomy community is ripping itself apart. They're sending hate emails to each other. It's a tragic, terrible thing going on here. Can you help? So I thought about it and said, yeah, maybe so. I knew that there was an annual or semi-annual meeting of the American Astronomical Society coming up in Philadelphia in about 2 weeks. So I contacted the head of the AAS. He said, sure, talk to the organizer for the event about a speaking time. So I did, and he said, I'm sorry, but all the slots are completely filled by researchers. And it's basically a research conference, and if I take away someone's slot to give it to you, it's going to make people upset. But here's what I can do. On Tuesday night, we have things scheduled, and I'll put up posters around and say the director of astrophysics is going to come talk to us about the Hubble situation. And I'll set up a room for you. but it's gonna be what would normally be dinner time, so I don't know how many people will choose to come hear you speak, and I want you to feel comfortable, so the hotel will set up a small room and it can be expanded very quickly. Staff will be there, open the partitions and make it larger and larger as people show up. I said, that's fine with me. So I'm on the train riding to Philadelphia. This is the first time that I've got to think about what I'm gonna say because I'm busy with other things in this job. So I'm asking myself, what's that dynamic here? And I said, what this is about is losses. And losses for me and everybody, and particularly this community of scientists. And what I know is the right way to move through losses is to mourn them. So I arrived there about on the train about 45 minutes ahead of time, have a little slack. The US trains don't always run exactly on time. Went to the meeting room and it started to fill up. And by the time it got to the time of my talk, every seat is taken and all the space around the room is standing room filled, like 1,000 astronomers are sitting there. So I went up and said, I'm here to speak to you about the Hubble and what happened here. And this is about losses. It's about losses for me, losses of my personal reputation, losses of my team's reputation, NASA, and frankly, even the US reputation, because it's a very international program and lots of international interest. It's about losses for you. Many of you I see are younger people in here, and I think a lot of you plan to do your PhD thesis on Hubble data. And there is very little data. You're not going to be able to do that. And a lot of you and your professors are funded by grants, what's called soft money. You're not on any salary from the university except these grants. And I'm sorry to tell you that the grants program is going to be severely curtailed because there's very little useful data coming out of this. So what I want you to do is just bow your head and let yourself reflect on the magnitude of the losses for you and everybody involved. So I did this for what I thought was a very long time, probably 2 minutes is what I'm guessing. My sense of time is warped. And I start to hear people sobbing in the room. Astronomers every place start crying. And then I said, okay, great. So here's what you want to do. Go home and complete the mourning process in whatever way works for you. And now I'm going to tell you about my commitment to find a way to fix the telescope. So I've done this many times, and I like it when I get some feedback after a workshop. I did this for a NASA workshop. About a month later, I got an email from someone, so I just wanted you to know this has been a profound effect on our lives. What I realized is my children and I had never mourned the fact that their father deserted us. And we sat together and spent Saturday and just felt the sadness of this whole thing. And the first time we finally moved on from it. So this is the power of mourning losses. Comments, questions, thoughts?
No, thank you, Charlie. It's a powerful thing. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, good. You know, what's fun is I related these things in my book, and then I said, did I really do this? So I called friends of mine who had been around at that time and said, yes, exactly what you did. It sounded incredible even to me after the fact.
Just
So-
one comment, Charlie.
Yeah.
I've noticed that always when people become emotional and cry about something, that they will apologize, you know.
Yeah, that's.
And I'm always then almost how can I put it? I look like very surprised and ask the question, but why do you feel the need to apologize? How did we get to that point where we apologize for becoming emotional about anything, joy or sadness or whatever?
Well, you know, I think it's interesting because sad is the only emotion where we need to intervene. But don't we feel a need when someone's sad to go to them and say, you know, how can I support you? How can I help you? that emotion elicits that response in people, then the others don't. You don't feel motivated to intervene when someone feels glad or mad or scared, particularly, but sad, we want to do that. So it's got this kind of depth to it, this inner piece that the other emotions don't have. So it makes it very powerful, but thank you for that. Scared group. One of my little hobbies is probing the irrationality of fear. A long time ago, there was an article in Physics Today when I was a young scientist about how we are afraid of the wrong things. And for example, there's a good book about this that points out that it's much more dangerous to have your children go visit someone with a swimming pool than have a bunch of guns. And so when I went on vacation to Egypt on a cruise, people said to me, "Aren't you afraid for your safety?" I said, "Yeah, the drive to Denver is quite risky to get to the airport." So rational fear is very useful. And by the same token, if we're going to go on a cruise like that cruise, for example, typically the way these cruises work, that once you book them, you start to lose your capacity to get your money back pretty early, like 3 or 4 months before you lose some of your money. You get down to 30 days before, if you don't go or can't go, you lose everything. So I started to be really aware of not walking up this big hill behind the yard or get on ladders in the 3 or 4 months before we went on one of these. So that to me is rational fear, taking precautions to not have a injury that incapacitated me in some way. And scared with love can mobilize. I had a project called X-ray Timing Explorer, and it was an interesting one in that this is one of these NASA projects that I was very fond of it. I understood it completely, but a very limited appeal. There aren't that many scientists interested in understanding these. These come from very high energy objects, pulsars and quasars, and looking at the time signature of X-rays, you could learn a lot. So the project's getting ready to get started, and it became obvious the cost had grown, and it's too expensive. So I concluded that we had to reduce the cost, and so I called a meeting of the science working group led by this guy, Hal Bratt from MIT, and said, "I'm going to meet with you at Goddard. We got to find a way to cut the cost out of this, and only way we can do this is reduce the scope, and that means the science requirements have got to be altered. And I believe if we can do this, we're going to succeed." So everybody came, and we had a very successful meeting, and we reduced the cost, and the project went ahead, and so forth. Years later, I got an email from Hale, long after I left NASA. He said, "I just wanted you to know something that happened in that we didn't tell you about. I met with all the scientists beforehand and told them that we're going to fight you like hell, and we're not going to reduce these costs, and we're going to demand that the project stay the same. But as soon as you met with you, you changed all of us. And the reason that you changed us is we got that you cared. We got that you cared about this mission and were trying to help us." So this is how scared group with caring can be so very powerful. Without the caring, it doesn't work. Scared with mad may immobilize people. And there's a whole thing here called the HPA axis, which is a whole bunch of internal hormonal triggers involving the hypothalamus, anterior pituitary, and adrenal cortex that changes everything when we're scared and we're angry. This is why, for example, eyewitness reports in trials are generally very suspect. If you want to get out of a jury trial, all you've got to do is tell them that you don't trust eyewitness accounts because you understand the HPA axis, and you'll be excused pretty immediately. That's a trick that Neil deGrasse Tyson uses. So there's basically 2 states we're talking about here. The sympathetic state, which is fight or flight. It's a place, again, driven by these hormonal interactions. It's very toxic. Then the parasympathetic state, and you can enter this with certain acupuncture, pushing on parts of your face. But to me, the easy way to do it is just simply to learn to belly breathe. And so I will do this later. I actually stand up and practice belly breathing. The primary way that I use this is that when I used to travel to China, I would typically have one day to time acclimate. It's like a 10 or 12-hour time shift, then go do a workshop. I wake up wide awake at 2 in the morning because of the time change. And what I would do is I'd lie there and try and focus on my breath. And it felt like nothing happened, like I'm still totally wide awake, but I open my eyes and it's 3:30. And close my eyes again and focus on the breath. By the way, this is a yoga practice called pranayama. And then it's 5 o'clock. And by the time I got to 6 o'clock, I'm up and I'm refreshed enough to go through the day. Interesting, we like the energy of scared when it's safe. That's why we like roller coasters. And we like horror films. We like to be scared because we like to feel energized. This is all about your energy of your body. This is a really interesting guy. I had briefly a trainer, kind of a go to the gym and do things. And she wanted to know what my goals were. And I said, actually, I've never had any goals. And she said, that's strange. I said, well, I never have. And I'll tell you, one goal I don't have is to live as long as possible. I'm going to live a life as long as possible that I can be cognizant of what's going on. I can read a book and understand it, or watch a YouTube video and understand it. But life beyond that is not of particular interest to me. And by the way, I called my friend Frank Martin and said, you ever had any goals? He said, I never had any either. So we both just sort of, the goal was to make a contribution, that's all. And so I said, you ought to read this book by Atal Gawande. And I looked at the book and decided that I've recently made this shift. I could read the book, which is 600 pages, and take, I don't know, 8 or 10 hours. I don't know quite how fresh read a book like this. Or I can go online and find his YouTube videos and hear what he's got to say. And so that's what I did. So here he is, and I'll now fudge this video too. By the way, I'm linking to the file. I'm not in.
Whatever it is, people have goals and priorities besides. Whatever it is, people have goals and priorities besides just living longer. The way we can learn what those goals and priorities are is a highly technical procedure. We ask them, but we don't ask. In medicine, we don't ask. Less than a third of the time do we ask people what their goals and priorities are if their health worsens. When we do, however, that group of people end up with less suffering because they tend to stop their aggressive therapy sooner. They have less days in the hospital or in the nursing home. They're less likely to die in an institution. They're more likely to go on hospice towards the end of life. And the irony is they live longer. Lung cancer patients in a randomized trial lived 25% longer, 1/3 lower costs. And that just means we're making bad decisions as we come to the end. The most important ways that these folks who are good at it do it is by asking certain basic questions that allow you to tune the care appropriately. And those few questions are, what's your understanding of where you are with your health or your condition? Prognosis is very hard as a subject, but people will often tell you exactly what they're experiencing. What are your goals and priorities if time becomes short? What are your fears and worries for the future? What are you willing to sacrifice and what are you not willing to sacrifice? Based on those, we don't ask them in our nursing homes, we don't ask them in our medical world. We have treated it as if doing so might be a death panel. But I think that's changing remarkably. I think we're finally accepting that we can ask these questions and then demand that our answers are honored, our wishes are respected.
So I put these in here, and I think that you should remember this slide or copy it if you encounter someone with a life terminating situation, and you will sooner or later, all of us do. Here they are. Do you understand your illness? What are your fears for the future? What's important to you if time is short? What are you willing and unwilling to go through for more time? And what would a good day look like? So the book has an anecdote in there about a guy who's got terminal cancer. That's what Gawande does. He's a surgical oncologist, and most of his patients die on the operating table, and another large number end up being quadriplegics. So that's why he asked them, he used to just do the surgery, what would a good day look like? And this guy said, if I could eat chocolate ice cream and watch football. And his son was there and said, well, you don't like football. I said, shut up, that's what I want. He did the surgery, and sure enough, he was a quadriplegic and was happy with the outcome because he could eat chocolate ice cream and watch football. And with physical therapy, 2 years later, he recovered. So that's kind of a little fun anecdote about this. What do you guys think about this? Does this make sense to you?
Yes, it does. Thank you. Thank you, Charlie.
Yeah,
These
I
are-
think it's interesting how much criteria keeps coming up.
It's criteria. Yep.
And these are good questions to ask anyways.
Yep, exactly. I like his observation that doctors are not trained to ask these. Isn't that fascinating? So, would you like to live forever? Lex Friedman runs a podcast interviewing a physicist, Max Tegmark. And he talked about Feynman influencing him to study physics. And he related a story Feynman tells about watching a fire and somebody saying, I feel sorry for you, you're a physicist, you can't enjoy just a natural fire. He said, on the contrary, I think I enjoy it much more than you. When I look at the fire, I'm seeing the electrons transitioning energy states. I'm seeing them emitting photons at certain wavelengths. I'm looking at the fire with an incredible amount of enjoyment of all the physics details that are going on within it. And then he said, do you fear death? And he said, no, it's the natural order of things. And then he said, what's more important is not whether your corporal body is alive, he said, whether you're alive in people's minds. And I thought about this. He said, our reminiscing about Feynman keeps him alive. There are people that I still think about just that have deceased that are just as important to me as they were alive when they were alive, because I didn't see them very often. So to me, thinking back on them, I say, well, Tony's still alive. I'm still thinking about him. He's alive in my mind. That's more important than the fact of his body. So to live forever, live a life of purpose and contribution, and you'll be alive in people's minds. So, comments or thoughts on this? What do you think?
These are all deep, very deep thoughts. And yes, I think we all appreciate it very deeply as well. Thank you, Charlie.
And I mean, it is true when you think about people who they are big benefactors or who build big buildings, donated, right? Like you go buy that building and hundreds and hundreds years later, you mention that it's so and so something.
So I think back on the people who, and there's a lot of them that were there for me at time, inflection points in my life. I've been thinking about the idea of inflection points. And these people were there and were supportive of me or helped me. I think back to the people that, for example, a guy named Dave Birch. When I was doing my PhD thesis, I had to process these photographic emulsions in these developing tanks. A big deal. And something had to be done very precisely. And he said, I'll do that for you. And it took a week of his time and things like that. And in that same venue, I was building this electronics sensor system to automatically scan these emulsion plates and couldn't quite think how to do the circuit that would work. And my friend Mario Acuna left his job and came down, spent a day, designed this circuit. So these are people that today they're all deceased, but they're not really. So just think about the people who were there for you. And for all of us, there's lots of them. Lots of them. So how about love? I wrestled with this for a long time, and I finally settled on this definition. Love is when another person's happiness and well-being is necessary for your happiness and well-being. That's the best I know. And it has in this thing about natural caring. It's an antidote for the mental illness of narcissism. So I think there are several kinds of love. Eros, by the way, I'm going to use the Greek terms for this because physics uses a lot of Greek terms. I'm familiar with them. And this actually is a picture from a Greek island I took, I think 2018 on Santorini Island. So just for fun. And Eros is selfish love, seeking sex, status, power, and I think it confuses pleasure with happiness. It's a dopamine thing. It confuses dopamine with serotonin, confuses pleasure with happiness. And then philos, partners in love with habitual appreciation, addressing shared interests. That's where I try and live with my wife. Then agape, transcendent love, addressing deep human needs with gratitude and appreciation. That's what I try and bring to the workshops. The best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. So this is a fun little piece. When I was teaching undergraduate classes, I noticed that students had a very odd response to how are you? They would say, fine, I'm really busy. Then they'd say, Professor, I hope you're really busy. What is this about? In Japan, they don't do this. They say, oh, genki desu ka? And how's your life energy? You say genki desu, so it inquires about your life energy. It makes more sense to me. In China, they say, historically, fine, I ate today. And more recently, fine, my stocks are up. And I was visiting Ireland when I was doing this work. And how are you doing? They say, fine, the weather is good, when the weather was lousy. So why in the US is being busy a good thing? What I'm going to do, I'm going to stop now and leave you hanging with that question. And we'll go back to the last 2 minutes for any comments from you folks. Comments or thoughts about today's session about emotions? Any good takeaways for you?
For me, there will always be good takeaways when we talk about emotions, obviously, and a lot of learning. If I just think of the last idea, finding yourself in serving others, coming from Gandhi, that's one of the foundational statements I use for myself, not even for others.
Good.
Yeah, I can just say that, yeah, it's just makes sense all the way.
Good.
Thank you, Charlie. My apologies, I was late, but it was just a amazing half an hour that I listened to. So, same as Nico, it's like that losing yourself in service to others. That sounds very powerful.
It's big, isn't it?
Yeah.
So Marissa, you've got to go. You want to make a quick statement?
Yeah. My sort of a very important highlight that I realize although I had the privilege and the pleasure to listen your presentations for many times for many years, every time when you're doing it, there is something new that I learn. So there is it's a very meaningful thing to repeat your wisdom thoughts, so to speak. So I appreciate it.
Matt,
Thank you.
you started all this.
Yes, I did. I'm glad I did. I think certainly, mirroring everyone else's comments, but to add a little bit to it, I think I forget how important emotions are in driving storylines. I recall when we were doing the CSW worksheet the first time, how getting to a green storyline required my command of my emotion. So
Good.
Charlie, last comment.
Yes, you got
I picked up on a line in the movie that I watched on Saturday. You guys know about it. Fly Me to the Moon. In the movie, what are we doing? Flying people now to the moon. And the answer was, you know what? We're giving people the chance to change their view of the world.
Mhm.
So may I give those words to you, Charlie, today for bringing us Hubble and changing our view of the world.
Thank you all.
yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you next week. Be safe.
Yep, will do.
Bye-bye.